What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you. Feel like I was just here. Thanks for all of you who hung out last night in the college football weekly breakdown video. Week 14, I got 5 college football plays after I had 2 yesterday. So a packed week, man. This final week of the season, you find additional situations. You can go watch that video. I'm not going to reanalyze all of this, but my plays are UL-Monroe plus 10, UTSA plus 7, although I think you can only get 6.5 on that one now, but I still do like it at that. I like the side. Michigan State minus 1.5, Western Kentucky plus 1, and LSU minus 6. And looking at the market right now, it looks to be against Michigan State and LSU, but obviously I don't agree with it. I mean, the situation leads me to make plays on both of those. So that's the way it is. Sometimes I'm not in agreement with the market. I don't love being in disagreement with what the market read is, because market reading is part of what I do. It's one of my tools, but whatever. I'll talk about college basketball. There are really only a handful of interesting games. It's not like a huge Saturday college basketball slate. There are a lot of games on the undercard, and I have picked out 2 games where I think they're just very misleading spreads, misleading lines. I'm going to play both of those. I'm going to skip the NBA, unfortunately, because it looks like there would at least be one spot where you would think that I would be able to make an NBA play, but I don't think I can do it. And then hockey, I'm trying to limit myself as well. And I have one play in hockey, even though it is a pretty packed hockey card. So let's get into it. Saturday is always packed in hockey. I'm already looking at hockey here, but looking at college basketball, basically all the games that are the big games, like if you want to watch like actual good college basketball, this Vegas Players Era tournament, this is where all the good teams are playing right now. You got Creighton and Notre Dame up at 1 p.m. here. Creighton, a ranked team still. They're up from 3.5 to 7.5 now. I don't really understand the huge line move there. But it looks, I don't know if there are injuries on the Notre Dame side or what that really is, or if that opener was just long ago. I'm not really sure. But Creighton has 54% of the tickets, 66% of the cash. So it does look like there is actually some legitimate money on the Creighton side. And looking at, I'm not playing any of these games, by the way, but just looking at the situation here, Creighton ranked 21st in the country. They are coming off a big game where they lost to Texas A&M in this same tournament. They've actually lost both games in the tournament so far, which does suck. So they may want to salvage a game in this tournament, but they do have Kansas up next, which is another big game, although it's not for a few days now. But does that mean they're going to overlook Notre Dame? I don't really know. I don't really consider this to actually be a sandwich spot, because I think they still want to show up and try to salvage this game. And like I said, the market looks like it is kind of all over the Creighton side here. Both teams are at 4-3, but Creighton is definitely the better team over Notre Dame. Notre Dame's coming off a difficult game of their own. They've also lost every game in this tournament they've played so far to Rutgers and Houston, I believe. And Houston, I mean, that's a tough game, man. Houston beats you up physically. They slow the game down. So Notre Dame coming off of that, it's not an easy spot for Notre Dame either. And it looks like there has been some movement towards the under in this game as well, down from 146 to 143.5. Games like that, I tend to actually look towards overs, because I think you're going to have like gassed defenses more often than not. But it looks like in that game, the indicator is otherwise. And then we got the rest of the games in that tournament, Texas A&M and Rutgers. It does look like there is movement on the over in that one, up from 144 to 150.5. Don't see percentages on these totals yet, but also Texas A&M down from a 7-point favorite to a 4.5-point favorite. 62% of the tickets are on Rutgers, 70% of the cash on Texas A&M. I mean, Texas A&M is definitely the better team. As I've been mentioning, I mentioned that I thought Texas A&M was overranked to start the season, but they have moved way up in the KenPom rankings, and Rutgers has not. So Rutgers, I think, was really, out of these two teams, Rutgers was the way more overrated team when Rutgers was ranked. They did not deserve a ranking spot, so I would probably be leaning towards the Texas A&M side here if you forced me to actually play this. Luckily, I'm not forced to play this because I don't want to, but I know Texas A&M is the ranked team, but for some reason the public appears to be coming in and taking the points with Rutgers. like I said, I don't agree with that. Texas A&M is coming off a nice win, though, in this tournament over Creighton. So are they in a letdown spot? I don't know. I mean, you could argue that maybe they actually are. And Rutgers on the other side, I mean, I don't want to play them either in a spot like this because they just had a fast-paced game against Alabama. Or I played Rutgers in that game, and they covered for me. And now coming off that game where they had to run up and down the court, they have to play again. So this is a game where I think both these defenses may be gassed. So if you were going to play this game, like I said, I would be looking to the over in that one. But it looks like the line has kind of gotten away from us a little bit. Although each point means a little bit less in basketball when it's a high-scoring game. But so maybe you haven't lost all value there. But obviously, I'd rather go over the lower number than the higher number there. San Diego State and Houston in the night card in this tournament. Houston's up from 11.5 to 12. 69% of the tickets and 85% of the cash on Houston. This seems like an NCAA tournament matchup. As we know, I think those teams did face off in the tournament not too long ago. And I think they were in the same region like 2 years ago, but they didn't actually wind up going head-to-head. I mean, odds makers are telling you Houston's the better team. That's not a surprise. Houston does have 2 losses, but they are both pretty good losses. I mean, what are Houston's losses? They lost to Alabama and Auburn. I mean, yeah, it's true that Houston has not beaten one of the best teams in college basketball yet, but the only teams they've lost to are like the best teams in college basketball. I still think Houston is one of the best teams in college basketball. Those were both close games. I would expect Houston to probably take care of business here, coming off kind of a close game against Notre Dame and not really with anything up next, but I don't know. And San Diego State, I mean, they are known for playing good defense as well. They're coming off that loss to Oregon after a nice win over Creighton. It seems like they've kind of been zigzagging. So if that's the case, then you would expect San Diego State to actually show up and bounce back from that Oregon loss as well. I don't know, but the market does appear to be indicating on the Houston side, and I don't disagree with it, really. And then what was the other game in this tournament? Oregon and Alabama. Alabama's up from 4 to 6, 71% of tickets, 78% of the cash on Alabama. I think that this, I don't know how long this tournament goes. This might be the last day of the tournament, right? And this is the championship of the tournament, maybe, because I think these two teams both have won every game in the tournament so far. Yeah, so this is the championship game. Alabama's a one-loss team, with their only loss being to Purdue. Obviously, they're battle-tested. They're coming off a close call against Rutgers. They do have North Carolina up next, but I don't think this is a look ahead because I think once you get to the championship, even if it's one of these tournaments that doesn't matter that much, I think you still want to show up and play the game. Oregon is still going to want to show up as well. Undefeated Oregon right now, but Oregon, I mean, they've faced a much easier schedule than Alabama has. They do have that one nice win over Texas A&M, but other than that, definitely a significantly weaker schedule than Alabama has faced. So the odds makers are telling you Alabama's the better team. I agree with it, although the one thing that you can say is that Oregon is the better defensive team out of the two. So this is kind of an interesting clash of styles here. Alabama wants to go fast. Oregon wants to play less fast. Alabama, they're not horrible defensively, but they're not very good defensively. Much better offensively. And Oregon actually has a bit more balance, but they're better defensively than offensively. They're the better defensive team here, getting points. But maybe the records are a little bit misleading, although you do have the rankings still in there. Alabama's a highly ranked team, and Oregon is unranked. But I don't know. I don't know if the public would have a tendency to still come in and say, oh, Oregon's undefeated. Let me take the points with Oregon. Maybe not when it's up against Alabama. But either way, it does look like the money has come in on the Alabama side. And like I said, I don't disagree with it just because they're the way more battle-tested team right now. And I do think they're the better of the two teams. And it may come down to which team actually is able to control the pace in that game. That game might be the best game on the slate all day. So, Jacob, what's up, man? You like Creighton? I mean, they're not as good now. They don't have Shireman anymore, man. He's on the Boston Celtics and probably will never play. I think he's in like the G League or something. Women's sports, do they even exist? I don't know. I'll only cover them if men are playing in them. I'll cover the trans women's sports. All right, and then I was going to comment quickly on a couple other games here on the college basketball slate before I get to my two plays here. Was I going to comment? I don't know. I don't know if I was. I was just going to say, I mean, I think Georgia, interesting spot that Georgia is in. I would say that they qualify as being in a sandwich spot. Um, they're coming off a couple big games against Marquette and beating St. John's, who they knocked St. John's out of the rankings. St. John's is actually a good team this year, as far as I can tell so far. So that's a nice win. And then they do have Notre Dame up next, but I don't know if you really look ahead to Notre Dame in college basketball. I mean, they're a decent team. I think they're in the ACC in college basketball, so I don't know if it's something you necessarily don't look ahead to, but I mean, it's definitely possible Georgia overlooks this Jacksonville team, a team from the Atlantic Sun or whatever coming into their place. Georgia's got one loss. It is to Marquette, but Georgia faced a pretty weak schedule prior to those last two games. Jacksonville actually is somewhat battle tested. I mean, they played pretty close at Furman, which is pretty impressive. Furman's a good team. They beat Virginia Tech. That's not unimpressive either. And I think that was in Blacksburg, too. So that's pretty wild. They were able to do that. I think I faded them off of that, and I won with Mercer. But Jacksonville was actually winning that game, and Mercer made a nice comeback to beat them and get me my win on that one. And Jacksonville also played Florida, but they didn't have a whole lot in the tank for Florida, I guess. I mean, Florida's definitely a good team and a team that can go really fast and throw slower teams like Jacksonville totally out of their element, which is not something that Georgia can really do. Georgia does not play fast. So both of these teams kind of have a similar tempo. So I may agree with looking towards the Jacksonville side here. I'm not playing it, but it does look kind of interesting to me. I was tempted. Georgia's up from 15 to 16 and a half, though. So take from that what you will, I guess. I don't see any of the percentages yet. The games I'm actually going to are, like I said, these are misleading spreads where it just looks kind of crazy. First one is Ohio, laying minus 10.5 on Ohio. I think maybe you could have gotten a better number on this. It wasn't 9 at one point, and it's going up, 10.5. It's going through the 10.5. I mean, 10 is less of a key number in basketball. Like 7 is really the key number in basketball. Anything in this range is still kind of similar, so I don't care that much about the difference between 9 and 10, really. 76% of the cash on Ohio, and tickets evenly split 50-50. I think that the perception of this game, the public might come in and look at this and think, wait a minute, Robert Morris has been winning almost every game, and Ohio has a terrible record. So look at this. You get Robert Morris, a 6-2 team against 2-5 Ohio. Well, what gives here? Like, why would I not want to take the points with Robert Morris, right? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because Robert Morris has faced a weak-ass schedule. All of their wins are against basically complete cupcakes. I mean, what's their best win is this road win against Cornell. Cornell not even very good this year, although that was still a big upset for Robert Morris. I think they were still almost a double-digit dog in that game, and they pulled off that upset. So, I mean, yeah, impressive win. Good for them. But Cornell also didn't have a great performance in this game, really, although Robert Morris did actually outstat them. It wasn't really a misleading result, but still, Robert Morris, their other games, they're finally playing a road game here again. They've only played 3 road games so far, and they're 1-2 on the road. Yes, one of them was West Virginia. I mean, they're not going to win at West Virginia, but they also lost at Delaware. I think both of those were road games. And Cornell, by far the weakest opponent that they've faced on the road. And now they're coming off a win over Canisius, or Canisius has just been getting blasted by everybody. They're a terrible, terrible team. And Robert Morris barely got by them, although you might say, well, that might scare them back into focus, right? I'm not so sure about this. I mean, I just don't really see it. I just think Ohio's the better team, and I think if both teams have reason to show up in this game, Ohio's going to be able to take control here. Ohio, they've had more time off as well, which I think I just showed. I think Robert Morris has been off for 2 days, right? Although I think their momentum is continuing. Let me see. Yeah, so they've had 2 days off, but that may help them continue their momentum at the very least. But Ohio, they've been off for almost a week now, and they went into that break off of a loss, and this is their only game in like a 2-week span, basically. So I think they're going to show up focused for this because they don't have a whole lot else going on here, in my opinion, even though the guys had to go home for the holidays, whatever. Now they have to come play this game, but that's the same for both teams, right? So for Ohio, they're going to be back at campus at least. And for college, it's not really the same as professionals when they have a return home spot. There isn't that you got to return to your families and you got distractions. For college kids, it's you were just with family and now you're returning back out of family. So it's almost the reverse, which is kind of crazy. But Ohio, they've faced a much more difficult schedule, man. I mean, UNC Asheville is a nice win. They're pretty good. Illinois State's not that bad. James Madison's pretty good. Memphis is good. Middle Tennessee is pretty good. They beat Portland. Portland was actually the worst team they faced. I think actually considerably so. And they beat Portland. And then Texas State, also not terrible. So Ohio, they face a significantly more difficult schedule. And looking at KenPom, I just have it up in a different window over here. I'll tell you in a minute. Robert Morris, they play a pretty slow tempo at 200th in the nation. KenPom has Robert Morris, the 43rd luckiest team in the nation. He has them down at 238th overall as how good these teams are. And he has them at 351st in strength of schedule out of 364. So he has them in the bottom 14 in strength of schedule. So that's how weak Robert Morris' schedule has been. And he has them as an extremely lucky team still at 43rd, like I said. Whereas Ohio, on the other hand, he has Ohio at 175th in the country. Ohio plays a significantly faster tempo, by the way, in the top 100, whereas Robert Morris likes to play slower in the bottom 100. Or so. So if Ohio's able to control the pace, which they may be able to do at home. They're at home. They're the better team. They should be able to speed up this game and get the game into their element. Ohio has the considerably better offense out of these two teams, even though their defense, I know, is not that good. But Robert Morris actually technically does have the better defense, but everything else I would put you on Ohio. Man, yes, he does have Ohio still a little bit high in luck as well at 94th, but I'm looking at tempo. What am I saying? He has Ohio at 226th in luck. That's a lot better. So he has Robert Morris as one of the luckiest teams in the country, basically top 50. And he has Ohio as one of the bottom third in the luck index. So KenPom's luck index is basically looking at your statistics. How many of these games were you expected to win, essentially? So he has Robert Morris basically overperforming significantly and Ohio underperforming significantly. And he's got Ohio at 150th in strength of schedule. Whereas, like I said, so that's right in the middle of the pack, whereas he has Robert Morris' strength of schedule way at the bottom. So this is a huge, there are a lot of KenPom kind of mismatches there for this game. So give me Ohio minus 10.5. It looks like a very misleading spread based on what these teams' records are, but Ohio is definitely the better team. I'll lay the points and hope that they win in a blowout. Robert Morris, I don't think they are, but they are, I could be wrong about that. I doubt it because Robert Morris was one of the colonists, basically, right? They're named after one of those awful colonists, I believe. They're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I don't believe they're one of the black schools, but I could be wrong. And then the other game I'm going to be on is, what do we have here? Lehigh -1, and this one might look even more crazy than the other one, which I like it, man. I like it when it looks so crazy that you're like, what the hell are you even doing here? This is Marist against Lehigh. This is at Lehigh. So Marist is 4-1, Lehigh 1-5. But Lehigh, again, we're going to look at their schedules in a minute. Lehigh has only played one home game this season, and they won it. So Lehigh, they have not had an easy schedule so far. Look at all these road games. They were against Northwestern, a Big Ten team, Georgetown in the Big East, even though they're not a good Big East team. They look like they're on the rise a little bit. Columbia, they lost by 1. Columbia's been playing really well this year. Look like one of the top Ivies. UCLA having to go out to the Pacific Coast, I assume, in that one. You're not going to beat UCLA. And their only win so far, yes, I know, is against a non-Division I team. And now they're coming off their one really embarrassing loss here against St. Francis, Pennsylvania. That's the one bad loss Lehigh has, man. They've had a really difficult schedule prior to that. They weren't expected to win any of these games. St. Francis, yes, they were expected to win this one as a 4.5-point favorite. They lost badly. They actually came all the way back. So that shows you that Lehigh's still, like, they don't go away. They have spirit. They put in effort in that game when they were, like, out of it and getting basically embarrassed by an inferior St. Francis team. So that at least shows me something, that Lehigh, they're going to give you effort, man. St. Francis shot really high from the field in this game, 54.8%. Probably not sustainable. So Lehigh, I think coming off of that, they're actually in a good spot to bounce back from that, in my opinion. And they finally get another home game here where they're 1-0 at home, like I said, but it was against a non-Division I team. So this is actually their Division I home opener. So they might have a little bit of extra effort for that reason as well. They've had a couple of days off to try to forget about that ugly loss. Meanwhile, Marist on the other side, yeah, they're 4-1, but look at their schedule, man. They lost at Harvard. They didn't play well in that game either, I don't think. And Harvard is not even that good this year, and that was a pretty ugly loss. They won at Richmond, which, yeah, that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's an upset win. It was an 8.5-point dog, but Richmond seems like they're kind of down this year. They're not that great. And then their other wins are against Army, Dartmouth, and UNH, and they barely beat UNH. I mean, not impressive. And now they've had a week off, and they have this one game on the road, or they haven't played on the road since November 9th. Now they have to go on the road, and they have an extra time off here. And I think that extra time off is going to hurt them, man, because when you're rolling like this, you don't want to stop your momentum, and I think that's going to stop their momentum. And now the odds makers are telling you that Lehigh, even though they're not the better team, that these two teams are very close, such that Lehigh is a favorite at home at the very least against Marist. Yeah, Marist is actually a program that's a little bit on the rise. They did pretty well last year, but I still don't think they're actually good. And I think this is, again, it's like this very misleading like record disparity here in this game, because Marist has faced such a weak schedule. This is what you can find in college basketball early in the season. You can find teams that have faced very, very weak schedules against teams that have faced much stronger schedules, and people might not realize it and just look at their records and think, well, wait a minute, like what gives here? So Marist, yeah, as I pointed out, they're 1-1 on the road. Nice road win against Richmond, but also a bad performance at Harvard. So how are they going to perform going out to Lehigh? I'm going to take a gamble on it and say that they're not going to win this game, but we will see. Lehigh's up from pick 'em to 1, going through the 1 with juice, by the way. So it does look like some market movement has come in on the Lehigh side. I don't see the percentages on this at all, but hopefully that means there is market agreement with me on this. And then looking at the KenPom rankings on this one, let me see here. Excuse me. By the way, his number on Ohio is way off from that number, by the way. He does have Ohio only winning by 6, but KenPom, like I said, I mean, sometimes you can fade his rankings early in the season. He needs to get like some more data in there, so I'm still comfortable fading that number in a game like that Ohio one. With Lehigh, he does have Lehigh way down at 298th, so they are not the better team in this game, but still, I mean, he's got them as a very, or not very slow, but a slow tempo team at 201, although I think both of these teams play kind of slow. And he does have Lehigh having faced the 17th most difficult schedule so far. So like I said, they've faced one of the most difficult schedules on the season, and he has them 344th in luck. So he has them as one of the least lucky teams in the country as well. So that means their record is misleadingly bad, basically, that they should be a little bit better than they actually are. They faced a very, very difficult schedule so far. I believe he has Marist winning this game by 1, but, I mean, that's right in that range. Like, either team winning by 1, not a huge difference at all. He's got Marist up at 240th in the country. They play a slow tempo as well, 317. So Lehigh actually is faster than Marist is. So Lehigh may want to actually try to speed the game up a little bit to try to get the game out of Marist's element a little bit, because Marist is so slow. But he has Marist 14th in the country in luck, and he has them at the 355th strongest schedule. So he has them in the bottom, like 10, basically, as far as weakest schedules that they've faced. They've faced one of the 10 weakest schedules so far in college basketball, and they're the 14th luckiest team in college basketball so far. That's Marist. So, yeah. Excuse me. So that's what we got there going on, even though he does still have them as the better of these two teams. I'm still going to say give me Lehigh, and Lehigh actually has the better offense out of the two teams at the very least. Marist is the better defense, but excuse me. But I know I usually like defense, but in games like this, man, I like playing these games where the spreads are just very misleading, and you got to dig into like what the strength of schedules are here. So give me Lehigh in that one. Yeah, that's right. Northern Iowa. Thanks for mentioning them, man, because they cost me money yesterday. I had Northern Iowa as one of my plays yesterday. That was pretty lame. They started out nice. Looked like it was going to be a win for me. Oh, man. Let's move over to NBA. We got a small NBA slate here. Hawks, Hornets. Here's the thing, man. Hawks, I mean, they look like they're in an absolute fade spot. They're up from 2.5 to 4.5. They have 82% of the tickets, 75% of the cash, so they're very public. I don't know what has moved this line up, but they're public with less of the cash on them. So, yes, I do agree with fading the Atlanta Hawks here. The problem is I don't know that I can actually come in and play the Hornets here either. Atlanta, I mean, look at what they just did. They just swept Cleveland in a home-and-home, dealing Cleveland their second and third losses of the season, back-to-back like that. And I think Cleveland, they were looking ahead to Boston, man. I mean, Cleveland wants revenge against Boston. So Cleveland, I think they got caught. I thought Cleveland would bounce back, though, after they lost the first game to Atlanta, but they did not. I think they were looking ahead to Boston. Now you got a situation where Atlanta's playing a third game in 4 days, a back-to-back, all three of those games in different cities. And they're also playing a fourth game in 6 days, with 2 of those games being at home. So they're bouncing around, but I mean, Atlanta to Charlotte is not a huge travel spot, obviously. I mean, that's a short travel there, but still, they could be in a big letdown spot. It would be worse for them if they had a big game up next, which they don't. New Orleans is probably not something they're going to really look ahead to. But I do still think it is a letdown spot for Atlanta. The problem is Charlotte, they're not in the easiest scheduling spot either, man. They just had a tough game against the New York Knicks as like a double-digit home underdog. And this was off of, look at these games they played recently. Orlando, Miami, New York, those are all like playoff teams. They played Miami close. They played the Knicks close last night, played them to within 1 as like a double-digit home underdog against a Knicks team that plays some pretty tough defense. So the Hornets have played some tough, like, physical games the last couple of games too. So I can't bring myself to play the Hornets either, even though this is a bad spot for Atlanta. The Hornets are on a back-to-back as well in a third game in 4 days and fourth and 6, but it's a better spot for them because at least all of those games are at home, so they're not traveling, and they still are looking to finally get a win on this homestand. So I do still lean to the Charlotte side, but I can't play it. Yep, it does suck, man. And then the other game I was going to comment on is this 76ers-Pistons game. Ugh, man, I mean, I was looking at this game, and I almost wanted to take the 76ers in this one. Detroit, they look like they're in not a very good spot to me as well. They're coming off a nice win over Indiana. That's a pretty decent win, even though Indiana hasn't been playing that well recently. And now they're returning home, although it wasn't a long road trip. It only took them to Memphis and Indiana, so not really like a huge distracted return home spot. And with no time off, that can go both ways, right? Because you return home, and if you don't even have time to get anything done at home, you're probably looking to get stuff done at home after you play this game, so you might still be focused on this game if you don't have any time off. So I think that actually kind of mitigates any return home distraction spot, but also when it was only a trip that took you away for 2 games, I don't think that you're that distracted from returning home either. I don't know what they did for Thanksgiving there because they were on the road playing basketball, so I don't know, but they are playing in a back-to-back here with travel, but just from Indiana to Detroit, not a huge travel spot there, but it is a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, fourth game in 6 days, and it's actually a fifth game in 8 and a sixth game in 10 days, with almost every game being in a different city, with 2 games being at home in there. So they have been moving around a lot, so I don't think it is the greatest spot for Detroit, and they may overlook Philadelphia, as awful as Philadelphia has been playing, with Milwaukee, Boston, New York all up next. This does look like kind of a sandwich spot to me, so I would only look to play the Philadelphia 76ers, but we know what I've been saying about that, even though I still think the Sixers were the right move to make in this last game against Houston. They took it into overtime as an underdog. I mean, what more can you ask for? And then they still didn't cover as a 5.5-point underdog. That's just bullshit, man. Sixers absolutely should have covered that one for me. 5.5-point underdog going into overtime. I mean, come on. That means you were pretty much on the right side there. Philadelphia, after that loss, they have multiple days off, and they're starting a road trip here, so that's a much more focused spot for Philadelphia. So Philadelphia actually has a rest advantage and a focus advantage. It looks like they're in a bounce-back spot here. So out of these games, actually, I think the Philadelphia play is actually better than the Charlotte play. I'm still kind of tempted to actually do it because I actually think Philadelphia is in a positive spot here. The only issue is you got to watch the injury reports here, man, because Paul George looks like he may come back for Philadelphia, but does that mean they have to work him back into the lineup again and it's going to be chemistry issues going on? I don't know. And Caleb Martin also looks like he's a game-time decision, but he's, he's a good role player, but not really a guy that's going to affect the line. Paul George might actually affect the line, although if he's back, Philadelphia's potentially going to play better. But the thing is, they have to work him back in and get that chemistry built back up. So do I want to take another shot on the Philadelphia 76ers here? I don't know that I really do. Pistons are up from 1.5 to 2. I don't see any of the percentages yet on this. Unfortunately, I think I just have to pass on this, but yeah, I mean, it sucks, but what can you do? I do think that the Sixers would be the only side that I would look to play in that game, though. What's up, Charles? And then Warriors-Suns, I mean, it's a big game. The Suns are down from 3 to 2.5, 56% of the tickets, 53% of the cash. So the Suns are a little bit public here. Kind of weird to see the public going against the Warriors. But the Suns do have Kevin Durant back. He's played 2 games now since he's come back, and I believe they won the first one and lost the second one. So I don't know how to handicap this game, really. I mean, the Suns arguably are in a bounce-back spot, it would appear to me, as they lost to Brooklyn in their last game. They've had a bunch of days off to kind of rest and regather themselves and focus on this game. So it does look like a focus spot for the Suns. I don't know why I hear a car beeping outside right now, but that's not great. Probably some dudes fighting outside there, outside of that bar. And then Golden State, I mean, they're coming off a more difficult game. They just lost to Oklahoma City, but they've had a couple of days off too, and they are starting a road trip, so it still does look like a focus spot for Golden State to me as well, because they're starting a road trip, a couple of days off there. I don't think it's going to be that much of a hangover spot. They're playing still one of the better teams in the Western Conference here, so I'm not going to get involved in that game either. Skip it. Yep. And let's move over to, to NHL here, where a couple of spots that I see in the NHL, man, it's very unfortunate that you have situations where both teams that are playing are both in bad spots, and a couple of the spots that I wanted to look at. I'm going to try to make this quick. Carolina, Florida, I will mention just because it is one of the big games on the slate here. Carolina's flipped from a 116 underdog to a -107 road favorite. So again, just like I said yesterday, the odds makers are telling you Carolina is the better of these two teams. They're a favorite on the road. 71% of the tickets, 80% of the cash on the Carolina side. So the market looks like it's indicating on Carolina. Carolina lost to this Florida team yesterday. So it could be a spot where Carolina is going to look to get road revenge, as they just lost at home to the same Florida team as a pretty decent-sized favorite. And this game was 3-3 in the third period. So the fact that it ended 6-3, that's a misleading final result. I mean, this is a close game, man. 3-3 in the third period, and then Panthers wound up with a shorthanded goal, and then they scored on an empty net at the end to make it look more ridiculous. I mean, statistically, the game played pretty close. So I would agree with the market on that one. The Carolina would be in position to bounce back here, and that result yesterday was misleading. Looking at this Philadelphia-St. Louis game, I mean, man, I wanted to play St. Louis, and it does look like the market is in agreement on this. Up from -128 to -141, 68% of the tickets, 82% of the cash. So the market is agreeing on St. Louis. Looks like the money is coming in on that side. St. Louis with now former Bruin coach Jim Montgomery is now at St. Louis, and they're undefeated with him. They're 2-0 with him. winning one game with each of their goalies too. But the problem here is that, first I was looking at the Philadelphia side, and I'm like, well, Philadelphia's obviously in a letdown spot. Like, they just came off beating the New York Rangers, man, after playing 3 straight overtime games as well in a pretty jammed schedule. And now they beat the Rangers yesterday as an underdog, a home underdog. And now they have to go out on the road for this one weird game against St. Louis. And then they just have a nice break after that, and then they face Florida. So it looks kind of like a sandwich spot to me for Philadelphia, a spot where they may not be totally focused. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to play St. Louis in this game. Then I look at St. Louis, and I'm like, oh, shit. St. Louis is returning home from a road trip, although it wasn't a long road trip, but they finished the road trip also by beating the New York Rangers and beating the New Jersey Devils, who are both pretty good, and they have a pretty weak Philadelphia team here upon their return home. Upon returning home, I mean, they came back and they had Thanksgiving and whatever, so they may have home distractions coming into play here, so they may not totally be focused on this game either. And they have Winnipeg up next, so that does worry me. So I just can't quite bring myself to do it, even though St. Louis does have the additional days off there. They are going to be the more rested team. I was potentially looking to maybe playing an over in this one, but the market looks like it's driven the line down a little bit more juice to the under here. So I'm just not so sure. And as far as the goaltending matchups, it is probably going to be Binnington again, so he would be the better of St. Louis's goalies. Philadelphia, I mean, their goalies are not very good, though. So I didn't really look into it that much further than that. Although I think Binnington, his games recently against Philadelphia have all actually gone under, so gives me a little bit of hesitation there. So I'm going to stay off of that game. And then we do have Washington, New Jersey is a big game as well. New Jersey's down from -180 to -160. Money looks like it is kind of moving in the Washington direction, with 50% of the tickets evenly split, 55% of the cash on the Washington side. I mean, as far as that's concerned, I would probably default to just looking at the market and agreeing with the market there. Washington, I mean, they beat me yesterday. That was basically the difference between a winning day and a losing day for me yesterday, was this stupid game where I had the Islanders as a nice underdog. Islanders were up 4-2 in the third period, and they wound up losing the game. They gave up a goal on a power play early in the third period, and they wound up going to overtime and losing the game in overtime. Just brutal way to lose. I think the Islanders were the right side in that game, especially at an underdog price. I liked the situation there. Washington's now coming off of that, but they may consider that to be a close call, so they may, even though it was an overtime game, it's not like they're going to be unfocused going up to New Jersey, but they're moving all over the place, man. So they're in a back-to-back, third game in 4 days, fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities, so the travel spot is not very good. But now they do have a chance at road revenge here, because New Jersey came into their place and beat them on the 23rd, which, by the way, also means this is a fifth game in 8 days for them as well. Most of them, almost all of them in different cities, moving all over the place, man, but up and down the East Coast for Washington. So the travel spot is not good, but I do think they'll still be focused on this New Jersey team. New Jersey, on the other hand, I mean, what are they up to here? They played yesterday as well at Detroit, and they're returning from Detroit. I don't think they're going to overlook Washington, even though they do have the Rangers up next. Washington's been playing so well recently. So this is a tough game to read. I mean, obviously, I'm not playing this game. They're playing a third game in 4 days as well, but they had more home games in the mix there in that last, fourth game. They're playing a fourth game in 6 days with more home games in the mix there, and a fifth game in 8 days, including that win over Washington. So I do still basically agree with the market on that one. Slight lean to Washington, but I'm not going to play that. Hurricanes wrecking Florida. Yeah, that happens all the time, right? The Hurricanes destroy Florida. I kind of want it to happen, man, because I'm no fan of Florida with how the Bruins have done against them recently, and how Florida has played kind of dirty against them recently. Thank you, Will. That's right. I never bet on New York City as like a city, as far as like being a successful city. Yeah. I apologize, by the way. I'm getting over an illness still, as I've mentioned. This is just not good. And then I will comment on Edmonton, Colorado, because this is the other big game on deck here, and then I'll mention my one other play, and then I'll get out of here. Edmonton, Colorado. Colorado's up from minus 118 to minus 122, 67% of tickets, 61% of the cash. So even though the money line has moved a little bit on Colorado, it does look like Colorado's public with less of the cash on them. So I would consider that to be a market indicator a little bit on the Edmonton side. Edmonton's coming off an overtime win last night over Utah. But what that does mean, at least, is that they're staying in high elevation. And that looked like not the best spot, by the way, because they were coming off a win over the New York Rangers. They had a lot of time off, though, and they were starting a road trip. So that is still kind of a spot where you may still be focused. And now they've started the road trip off on the right foot. They're in high elevation already, so it's not like the worst back-to-back spot. And with so much rest before that game, it looks decent to me. And Edmonton probably is going to have Skinner back in net for this one, too, because Picard was in there last night. So it doesn't look like that horrible a spot for Edmonton, really, or even really a bad spot, other than it being a back-to-back. Colorado, I mean, they're also in a back-to-back, and they were in Dallas, and they have to return from Dallas up into elevation. And they've played a hard stretch of games here, man. Washington, Florida, Tampa, all on the road. Return home from one game. They beat Vegas in a shootout. They go back out on the road. They're bouncing all over the place, man. They're on a back-to-back. They're on a third game in 4 days. Excuse me, a fourth game in 6 days, a fifth game in 8 days, a sixth game in 10 days, I guess is what it is. Like basically all in different cities except for that one other home game in the mix. So it does look like a worse spot for Colorado to me. Even though they did lose last night, that's still a tough game, a big game against Dallas. But this is also a big game against Edmonton. So, I mean, they're not going to necessarily be unfocused. But Edmonton, I think, has a significant rest and travel advantage in this game. So that's the way that I would look in this one. That's right. Thank you, Charles. Everybody, like the video and get people to subscribe, man. Boost my numbers. My numbers have been going up, even though they're still small. We'll see. My numbers are increasing a little bit. And then my actual play in hockey is going to be one of my patented overs, and it is Utah-Vegas over 6.5. I mean, I do know that this has gone up no, it hasn't gone up. It's still sitting at 6.5. We have 67% of the tickets and 98% of the cash on the under. Hopefully that's not actually true. I'm not entirely sure that I see that being the case. Looking at this game, I was looking at it, and I'm like, first of all, man, Utah, they're in a fade spot here, man, because what I just showed you, they just lost in overtime last night to Edmonton. So that's pretty ugly. Now they have to travel down to Vegas. Tough spot, even though Vegas is a team that's going to draw your focus. But still, I mean, coming off that overtime game, a couple of overtime games in a row, though a little bit of a break in there. Still, that's a tough game to be coming off of. And because they had a break, it does look like Vejmelka is going to be in net again for Utah here, which probably isn't that horrible as far as an under is concerned. I think in his games against Vegas, they're 1-2 to the under, I think, in the last couple of years, if I remember correctly. So not really a whole lot to gain from that. Vegas on the other side. Vegas, I think they're in a bad spot, man. I don't think either team is in a good spot, but Vegas, they just returned home from a road trip, beat the Winnipeg Jets, and they have Edmonton up next. They played Philadelphia and Colorado both into shootouts to finish the road trip. Beat Winnipeg yesterday. Huge win for Vegas, beating Winnipeg. I thought that might be a spot where Winnipeg was in position to get a win there, and that didn't happen. Huge win for Vegas, and now they step down. They have to play Utah, who they just beat on the road back on the 15th, so I know I'm making a case to play Utah in this game here as well. I do probably lean to the Utah side, but I think the over is better here because Utah, I don't want to play them off of that big game against Edmonton either. Vegas is in a worse rest spot here. So as far as this game versus that other game, the Blues game, I was maybe looking to go over in that one. I think the rest spot is worse for both teams in this game than it was in that game. So Vegas, I mean, they've just been playing a lot of games. They're playing a third game in 4 days. Fourth game in 6 days, fifth game in 8 days, sixth game in 10, and actually a seventh game in 11 days, it looks like. I mean, that's crazy. That's something you don't see in, like, the NBA, but you do see in hockey every once in a while. Vegas, yeah, like I said, they have Edmonton up next, so it looks like a sandwich spot for them as well. So I would look to the Utah side here, but I'm going to play the over here. For Vegas, it looks like Samsonov is probably going to be in net because Hill played last night, and it's a back-to-back here. If you look at Samsonov, I mean, he's had some struggles at times, and in his games against Utah, I looked over his entire career, basically. I went back 3 or 4 years or whatever it is, and those games have gone 4-2 to the over. So Samsonov's games against Utah/Arizona, obviously. I was looking at Arizona in the previous years. Those games have got over, and I don't really trust Arizona or Utah's goaltenders either, really, man. I mean, Vejmelka and Ingram, they're all right, but this game, I mean, it looks like a game where there's going to be some tired defenses here and maybe a little bit of lapse in focus. So I'm going to play the over in that one, and hopefully my overs continue to do well. I know a lot of my over leans throughout the season have hit, and the ones that I've actually bet, I think, are only like 4-3, but still, I mean, hockey's been good to me this year. Hopefully it continues. Yesterday, I still think I had the right side yesterday in that hockey game, and it just didn't get there. But that's going to do it for me, man. So go check out my college football video before the college football starts in a half an hour. Once again, my plays, we got a pretty packed card here. In college football, UL-Monroe +10. Texas San Antonio +7 or +6.5 now is probably the best you can get, but I still would not recommend against it. Michigan State -1.5. Western Kentucky +1. LSU -6. College basketball, Ohio -10.5. Lehigh -1. And NHL, Utah Vegas over 6.5. That's going to do it for me. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. Yeah, it was definitely an oily game. A lot of sex going on the ice there, man. It was an ice orgy. Everybody was penetrating everybody's ice holes in that game. That's going to do it for me. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. Charles, Nate, Will, Jacob, all you guys being degenerates and hanging out with me Saturday morning. Again, go check out the college football video if you want the analysis on that. I broke down a lot of college football games in that one. It was like an hour and a half. Nate was there, I know. I don't know if any of the rest of you guys were, but thanks for hanging out. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Go follow the Tower Gang podcast, patreon.com/Tower Gang, and you get live pre-show, post-show. Our post-show this week was complete madness, one of the most insane that we've ever done. Clint said that he was completely dying laughing, and rewatching it, I was also dying laughing again as well. That's right, Tower Gang, Tower Gang, Tower Gang, the most offensive and funny podcast that you will ever find, man. So go do that. Go subscribe. Check us out at Tower Gang. And that's going to do it for me, man. I will be back again tonight with an NFL video. I know I started off the week 0-1 with the Miami Dolphins, but I got 2 plays that I like in the NFL for tomorrow, and I'll talk about that tonight. Charles, you sent in a mailbag. I don't think I personally saw it, but the thing about the mailbags is we never get to all of them. For whatever reason, just because it's a running joke, we get Mark Vestibule. He gets like the first, we read him as the first mailbag, and then we usually only get to like 2 or 3 other ones. And I know on this show that we just did, we had like a mailbag kind of come in as a super chat from Rumble. So the super chats from Rumble also have to get in there because people are paying for the super chat. So it's tough, man. We just can't get to all the mailbags. And they kind of just go first come, first serve. But although I try to do it so that if one of them is really not funny or whatever, we'll like skip the non-funny. But I don't know. We'll see, man. So hopefully we'll get to one of your mailbags at some point. You can just repeat submit it, and hopefully get in as soon as like Top Lobster puts that like chat up in Telegram. I don't know when he actually does it though. And then if you get yours in like right at the top, like one of the first ones in, we may indeed get to it. All right, that's going to do it. Have a good day, everybody. Let's get some wins today. I want wins on a big day like this. I do not want to have a horrible day, because when you put this much at risk on one day, man, there is that chance that you'll have one of those really bad days, and I don't want that to happen. I've had one recently, so let's not have that happen. Thanks, guys. Peace out.